We are here at the food rescue session. Is everybody here for food rescue? Woo! All right. One of the most important things we're focusing on, I think, this year is food rescue, and we have some wonderful information and examples to present to you on communities that are really moving forward in this arena. But in order to kind of tee up the discussion, we wanted to give you a context for food rescue, which is that food is really still what's in the garbage. And in your community, I think food is still number one of what's being thrown away. And that's even in communities that have organics collection programs. We still have a lot of food that's being thrown away, and a lot of food that is edible food, edible by humans, edible by animals, that is going into the trash or going into the organics collection program. And so this session will focus on some examples. But first, to kind of give the context for that, we have Nancy Carr and Mark Umphris from the Cal Recycle to kind of give us a peek inside of their brand new tool and information about what's being thrown away in California, because this is the context of why we are focusing on food and food rescue. So they're going to give you an overview of how to use the tool, how to get into it, how to find the data, and then we'll get into it a little bit more with a new mapping tool from US EPA and some examples from Santa Clara County and from San Diego County about what those counties are doing to move forward on food rescue. And so first up, I'll be introducing each of the presenters, and then we will have a few questions in between each of the presentations, and then maybe a few more questions at the end. So first up is Nancy Carr and Mark Umphris, who are senior environmental scientists in the Policy Development Analysis Office at Cal Recycle. Nancy started doing statewide waste characterization studies in 1998 and has 5 under her belt. And now she and Mark conduct analyses of waste data to provide technical assistance to those that use the data. And again, for those of you who are coming in late, this is a food rescue panel, but starting off with what's in the trash. And so we'll let Mark go first.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So Cal Recycle has developed a tool, an online tool that uses data from our 2014 waste characterization study, and it combines it with local employment and population data to provide estimates of what waste streams might look like at the local level. So before we dive into the tool, we kind of wanted to give a background of the waste characterization study that we just completed. We probably all know what a waste characterization study is, but basically it's a way to get a measure of the amounts of material and the types of material that are in our waste streams. And we did this through field samples and sorting. And in our study, we had 68 different material categories, and one of those, of course, was food. So our study was done doing basically 2 different methods. The first method was a disposal facility-based study where we went to landfills and transfer stations, and we got samples from different sectors, from the residential sector, the commercial, and the self-haul sectors. Took that material, sorted it and into the components, and figured out what was in the waste. The second method was characterizing discards at businesses. And on this, we didn't just look at disposal, but we also looked at the other side, the diversion side, recycling and other diversion activities as well. And And basically, that's the part of the study that we're going to focus on, because that's where most of the information for our tool actually comes from. And before crews went out into the field, we had to make a lot of decisions, but one of those was how do we break this up into manageable chunks and different business groups. There's like over 100 different business types at the NAICS level, and we can't obviously go and visit all those, so we broke it up into similar business types. So A business that might have a lot of employment, such as restaurants, was a business type of its own. We also looked at those businesses that had similar waste streams, as well as large organics generators. And what we came up with were these 16 different business groups, and this is what was found, was used for our study. Included in this too was multifamily, because multifamily waste is typically treated the same as businesses as far as service. And so with these 17 business groups, we had 50 samples of disposed material taken, so for a total of 850 samples of total disposal. At roughly half of those businesses, we also collected recycling and other diversion information as well. And by other diversion, talking about like self-haul that business might do, or if they do a separate metals collection. So we try to get a whole, picture of their waste streams. We had 18 landfills or transfer stations that we recruited as nodes, and a node was a location upon which we could take our samples back, the disposal samples, do the sorting and characterizing of the waste, and then do the final disposal of the material. And the nodes also served as a center point upon which we drew a 30-mile radius, and from there we could select and recruit the businesses that would participate in our studies. So if we look at a few pictures of the actual field work, the top two are examples of the disposal collection. Those were at the sites, and again, the bottom, I guess that would be left for you, was where the disposal was actually sorted at the node. The bottom right is a picture of the recycling samples, and those were not taken back to the nodes. And after the recycling was sorted, it was put back in the waste containers, or the recycling containers. Again, all four of these are pictures of the recycling collection. Material was sorted, weighed using portable scales, and recorded. And also, we had interviews, as shown on the bottom right, for the other diversion activities that were happening at these businesses. So our final report had composition summary tables for each of the 16 business groups, plus one each for multifamily and one for the overall commercial sector. The table shown here is for the restaurants business group. And I know this is hard to see, but I'll kind of go over it with you. From the left to the right, the columns are material type, followed by data for disposal, curbside recycle, curbside organics, other diversion, and total generation, which is the sum of the prior four columns. Within each of the data columns are estimated tons for each material type, and the estimated percent that material type represents of the total within the column. So here's a close-up of that same table as the top left of it. It shows that within your average restaurant, you would typically find that 2% of their disposed stream is made up of cardboard. And that is right there. And not shown here, but we also found that food waste to make up about half of restaurants' disposal on average. So we were also able to determine what we call TPEPI, which is the tons per employee per year for each of the business groups. And with this information, you can estimate the amount of disposal or diversion an average business within one of the business groups is likely to generate based on their number of employees. And so you can see for restaurants, again, we have an estimate of 1.57 tons per employee per year. From EDD, Employment Development Department, we obtained employment totals for all cities and counties in California, broken out by the 16 business groups. And this, combined with the statewide TPEPI data, allows us to estimate disposal and diversion amounts at the local level. And this is pretty much what the online tool is that Nancy's going to show you in just a minute. for Alameda County. Within the restaurants business group, there was a total of 2,854 employees in restaurants in Alameda. So basically, in a nutshell, we take the TPEPI for a business group and multiply that with the employment of that business group for a jurisdiction, and then apply the composition percent for the individual material type, which gives an estimate of the amount of material a jurisdiction might expect to find in each stream. And if we want, we're going to go ahead and look at the actual tool now. I'm going to turn it over to Nancy.
The laptop we have here doesn't have a mouse. It has the little pad, and I really am bad at that. So Mark's going to run the database for me. Okay. I cannot tell you how excited I am to be here today to show you our new waste characterization tool. If you know about waste characterization, you might know we had an old database that was very, very old, and this is the update. And it's not only new and updated, it's expanded. As you can imagine, from what Mark told you about our study, it took a lot of time and effort and money to gather that detailed data on the commercial waste stream. But now that we have that data, there are a lot of things you can do with it, and we think this is one of the pretty nifty uses of it. So we're going to start here on the home page. So what you will find here is, in the blue box, kind of in the middle there, is the tool. We also have some handy links up at the right and a lot of background information. And there are links and background information kind of distributed amongst the whole website here. So as Mark explained in his wonderful calculation, the web tool combines the statewide average waste characterization data for TPEPI and composition with local employment and residential data to make local estimates. So the first thing you have to do to look at local data is choose a jurisdiction. So that's what you do on this page. So if you click in the county box, that will bring up a list of counties. We're going to do the city of Sacramento. So let's pick Sacramento County. And then once you pick a county, if you click in the jurisdiction box, it'll bring up a list of all of the jurisdictions in the county. Notice at the top it says Sacramento County-wide. If you pick that selection, that takes the data from all of the jurisdictions in the county and adds it up together. So it's looking at the county level. So it's county-wide, everything added together. You can select more than one jurisdiction. So let's pick the city of Sacramento, or you can combine two together. So once you pick one, if you click on it again, it brings up the list, and you can pick a second one. You cannot choose jurisdictions across county boundaries, though. If you want to do the combination, you have to pick it all within the same county, and the database will add the data for those jurisdictions, those multiple jurisdictions that you've picked. Okay, hit reset for a sec. If you don't know the county your city is in, if you click on the jurisdiction box, it'll bring up a list of all of the cities and jurisdictions. If you type an S, it brings up the S's, and you can pick Sacramento from here too. So go ahead and pick Sacramento. Okay, so we've picked our jurisdiction. Once you pick a jurisdiction, you can look at data for it three ways: commercial streams by business group, commercial streams by material type, and residential streams. So we're going to start with commercial streams by business group for the city of Sacramento, and you hit the search button, and that will take you to that data. So this is the commercial waste stream by business group page for Sacramento. Scroll up at the top for a sec. And this is for all material types. So let's look at the table. So this shows how many tons the tool estimates to come from each group, each of our 16 groups, for each of the discard streams that Mark showed you. So disposal, curbside recycling, curbside organics, other diversion, and those all add up to give you generation. So these tons are estimated by that formula Mark gave. Statewide TPEPI times local employment gives you tons. So the tons add across to give you total generation, and the percents add down. So that tells you the percentage that business group is contributing to that stream. So this is sorted, our default sort is total generation, largest to smallest. So that is telling us that the services, professional, technical, and financial group in the city of Sacramento is generating the most waste of all the business groups. If you want to know what businesses are in that group, if you click on its name, that will take you to a page that has a description of the group and also a listing of all of the 3-digit NAICS codes that are in that group. So if we go back, If you want to see the composition of any of the groups, you would click on that yellow button. Don't do that yet. That yellow button will actually say details when you look at it in an expanded view. So I'll show you that later. So you can sort on any column. So let's sort on the curbside recycle tons. And it always does smallest to largest. So if you click on it again, it'll give you largest to smallest, which is the way everybody wants to look at it, but, computers do what they want. So what this is saying is for the business group that is contributing the most tons to the curbside recycle stream is the services professional, and it's about 8,000 tons, and that's about 25% of the materials we're estimating to go into the curbside recycle stream for this business group in the city of Sacramento. Okay, so let's sort by total generation again, just to kind of reset for a sec here. Sometimes it takes a minute. Okay, I think that's what we got. Okay, so if we scroll up a little bit into the material types box, it says all materials. So that was everything in those business groups added up together. But you can look at things by individual material type. So since we're in the Food Rescue Summit, let's look at food. So if you scroll down to the organics category, there's food. So click that and then hit the search button. There we go. Okay, it takes a minute. So if you want to click on the total generation to sort that largest to smallest. Yeah. So what this tells you is basically what the distribution of food is amongst all of the business groups. So we're just looking at one material type and looking at where it's showing up in the business groups. Okay, so as you would expect, restaurants are generating the highest amount of food of all the business groups in Sacramento. If you want to look at what the whole waste stream looks like for that business group, you just click on the yellow button. And this takes you to the business group waste stream by material type page. So this is like the second way to look at the data. This is that second button on the home page. So what this shows is the composition for restaurants by 68 material types and by the different streams. So the material types are grouped into 10 main categories. So there's all kinds of fun things you can do with this. You can export the data to Excel. You can collapse the groupings or ungroup the materials. So let's collapse the groupings. And that will show you just the totals for each of the 10 categories if you want to look at the summary. And if you expand the groupings, then that gives you that view again. And you can ungroup the material. So if you click on that button, what this does now is take those groupings away and sorts. The default sort again is generation largest to smallest. So for restaurants, and as we would expect, 47% of the materials generated is food. So you can look at the whole composition, all the material types for restaurants, and then you can sort it by any of those things you want to sort. Okay, so I want you to look at a number on this table. See the disposed tons for food, 14,281. Remember that number. Okay, now if you click on that yellow button next to food, that takes you back to the view we had before, which is looking at the distribution of food amongst all the business groups. There's that 14,281 tons again. So it's kind of looking at the data different ways. Okay, let's go back to the home page again, which is from the waste characterization link at the top. And let's look at that second way to look at the data, commercial streams by material type. And I think you need to select in the business groups, select all business groups, and hit the search button. Takes a minute. So what this shows is the composition like we had for restaurants, but now this is the commercial sector as a whole by the 68 material types. So this is all of the businesses, all of the tons of each material type added together to give you an overview of the whole commercial sector. And if you scroll down to food, so we're saying about 55,000 tons is disposed by all the business groups added up together in Sacramento. If you click that yellow button, that again takes you to scroll down a little bit more, what the distribution of the food is amongst all the business groups. So we saw this again. There's that 14,281 number again. So there's kind of two main ways to approach the data. If you're interested in a particular business group, you can look at the detailed composition for that group. If you're interested in a particular material type, you can see how that material type is distributed across the groups and all the different streams. Okay, let's talk about that 14,281 number for a second. That's the estimated tons of food disposed by restaurants in Sacramento, estimated by the database. The composition data in this database is from our 2014 study, as Mark showed you. That is from 2014, and that was before California's mandatory organics recycling law kicked in. Also, the composition percents are based on those statewide averages. If the city of Sacramento, as I'm sure they are, if their restaurants are really kicking in high gear and just diverting waste up the wazoo, that number is going to be too high for what they're disposing. They're going to be diverting more than that. So this is statewide average. Those 50 businesses, those 50 restaurants we did all across the state in 2014 to get this estimate. So you have to remember these are statewide estimates, and this is to help local governments kind of get an idea, but you also need to keep the local conditions in mind, because that, of course, is going to affect what's really in your waste stream. Okay, so now I want to talk about that. So that's one of the limitations of the database. I want to talk to you about another important limitation. So let's go up to the top and pick a different jurisdiction. Let's pick Yolo County, my home county across the river. And we'll pick Yolo County countywide. And we'll do it for all material types. One of the neat things about this new database that we couldn't do in the old one is you can, whoops, I do that all the time. I hit the wrong link all the time. Okay, you have to select select all materials, and then somehow it put Sacramento in there again. So, okay. Yeah, reset. This is a fabulous database, but it is brand new, and our IT guys are dealing with like a new statewide template, you might have noticed. So there are a few glitches. Okay, now, when you do the selection, Yolo countywide, all material types, you get this red warning that says some data for this selection is suppressed and affects the results, and also the more information afterwards. But let's scroll down and see what this is. Okay, if you go all the way to the bottom, you'll see education and hotels and lodging. There's nothing but zeros there. What is going on here? My alma mater, UC Davis, is in Yolo County. Plus, I live right near school. So I know education is in the county, and I also know hotels and lodging are in that county. It's showing up as zeros here because the data has been suppressed. Now, one of the ways that affects this data, besides giving you zeros, is see those totals at the bottom? Those are adding up everything in the column. So if data is missing, those total tonnages are going to be low. Okay, so let's go back up to the top. And next to the red warning button is the blue more information. Let's click on that. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Well, let me just explain what that is. That will take you to a page that shows for the selection that you've made the business groups that are suppressed and actually the number of businesses, but no employment data. As Mark said, we purchased data from the Employment Development Department. There it is. Yay. And they have to be very careful about protecting the confidential data for businesses. So data is suppressed basically kind of two ways. If there are 3 or fewer businesses in a group in a city, then it will be suppressed, or if there is one employer that is 80% or more of the employment. So in Yolo County, maybe UC Davis is the employer that's 80% of the employment, so it's suppressing that data. When we purchased the data, we also got total employment for all of the jurisdictions. So whenever one business group is suppressed, they have to suppress a second group so that we can't get the missing data by subtraction. They're very sneaky that way. But the second group that's suppressed is usually the one of the remaining ones that are not suppressed. It's the one with the smallest amount of employment, so it has the least impact. So if you're a small jurisdiction you might have several business groups that get suppressed, but overall the database has employment for 95% of all the employment in the state. Okay, I'm going to show you the last part. Let's go back to the waste characterization homepage. The last way to look at the data is by the residential sector. Now, Mark told you we did two types of studies. We did a disposal facility study and a generator study. The disposal facility study was disposal only. The generator study was disposal and diversion. For the residential data, this is disposed data only because we did not do diversion for single family. So if you want to look at the whole residential sector, single family and multifamily added up together to be total residential, we can only do disposal. So the single family composition is actually based on a regional composition that we did in the statewide study, and the multifamily composition is based on a statewide. And we used population and housing data to estimate the tonnages at the local level. So again, the single family tons add up across to give you total residential tons, and the compositions add up and down to give you 100%. That's the percent of that material in that stream. Okay, so that's the whirlwind tour of the database. If we pull up the slides again. We have the address. We don't have it on our main homepage yet, but if you're familiar with the old database, all of those links now redirect to this. So this is the address. If you can't write it down fast enough or whatever, want it, come to me and I'll give it to you. The next slide, if you want to look at the studies that the background data is based on, links to that are on CalRecycle's homepage. And then finally, this is our contact information. And before I end, I wanted to just give a shout out to our IT guys. I think, is Gray here? Is one of them? There he is. Okay. Raise your hand again. He and Chris Allen went above and beyond the call of duty to work their magic to make this work. So I really am very thankful for all the work they did on this. Thank you.
Nancy, go ahead and take a few questions, but if you wouldn't mind repeating the question for the recording. Anybody have any questions for Nancy or Mark?
So is there a way to export the data from this into EPA warm reports so cities can use it for climate action planning by business segment?
You want to get right on that, Gray, to do that? No. It exports to Excel, so you can play with the data all you want. That is a potential thing we could look at doing in the future, absolutely. So tell me that afterwards, because I'm not sure what you said. So, what else?
When you selected the business groups, were the restaurants all lumped together, anybody serving food, so fast food is lumped together with food service restaurants?
The question is the restaurants include full service and fast food? Yes, it does. It's all restaurants lumped together.
Question up here. Did you do any cross-checking? So, for example, were you able to get any information from any of the counties to see if it was in the same ballpark as the information that they might have had?
You mean in terms of what kind of information?
Disposal tonnage, for example?
Nope, not yet. But if you're a jurisdiction and you're using this and you have some information that will help us make this better, please tell us. At the bottom of each page is the address of our waste characterization email box, and this is new. We haven't done it before, and California, CalRecycle is the only entity in the known universe, as I like to say, that does this kind of data collection on this scale. So we can't cross-check a whole lot. So if anybody has any data that we can use to cross-check this or refine this, we would love to have it. One more.
I was wondering, was it a four-season sort?
Yes.
Just repeat the
The question was it a four-season sort? And yes, it was.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now that you know how to find out how much food there is to be recovered in your jurisdiction, thank you very much, Mark and Nancy and the IT folks for that great tool that we have. We're now going to hear about another tool, and this is a U.S. EPA tool. You're going to be hearing from Charlotte Ely, who works with the Sustainable Water Program at US EPA's Pacific Southwest region, which we call Region 9, where she supports the adoption of renewable energy and water efficiency projects and practices. And Charlotte is going to introduce the US EPA's Wasted Food Mapping Tool. And her involvement in this tool has an interesting backstory. backstory, which she will tell us about. So thank you, Charlotte.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, sort of World of Waste Management, for having me here. I'm actually a guest from the water and wastewater sector, speaking on behalf of a colleague who couldn't be here today. I'm a life scientist with our water division, and this is a project that evolved out of a tool that we created about 5 years ago called the Waste to Biogas Mapping Tool. And this, with this version of the tool, we wanted to have it include not only additional sources of wasted food, which is an acronym for food and other organics, diverted, and also more sort of management options. So not just for anaerobic digestion, but also for feeding hungry people, feeding animals, composting, etc. But before I jump into the tool, I kind of wanted to explain to you all why the wastewater sector is so interested in this, and why I think it's a really good option. In the first few minutes of the presentation, I will try to answer the question, can a water treatment facility be a water resource recovery facility? A new nexus that I'm hearing about, and then we'll dive into the tool. So people are probably familiar with the term wastewater treatment plant. What we're hearing in the industry more and more is this idea of wastewater treatment plants or publicly owned treatment works being water resource recovery facilities. Also, they're being called utilities of the future. And is a wastewater treatment plant just a wastewater treatment plant if it's also producing tertiary treated water that is being used for direct potable reuse? In thinking about this, I dug up a quote from my undergraduate days, and I wanted to share that with you today. Speaking is doing something other than expressing what one thinks, translating what one knows, something other than putting the structure of language into play. Adding a statement to a pre-existing series of statements is to make a complicated and costly gesture that implies conditions, and that involves rules. A change in the order of discourse does not suppose new ideas, a little ingenuity, creativity, or another mentality, but transformations in a practice, eventually those adjacent to it and in their common articulation. So just a pop quiz, and this might not mean as much since this is not the wastewater sector here, but who do you guys think said that? Was it Michel Foucault, author of The Order of Things, or David Sedlak, author of Water 4.0, the past, present, and future of the world's most vital resource? Okay, yes, the French philosopher, indeed. What are we talking about when we're talking about this new wastewater paradigm? When you go to EPA's website and you look up the definition of a wastewater treatment plant, this is what you would read. Sewers collect sewage from wastewater from homes and businesses and industries and deliver it to wastewater treatment facilities before it's discharged into water bodies. The end. But there are a group of people in this industry, WRF, WEF, NAQUA, Water Reuse, that are getting together to change what this is and to have it really take into consideration, all the different facets of a wastewater operation. And they've written that instead of solely collecting and transporting wastewaters as far downstream as possible to central treatment plants where wastes are cleansed to meet permit limits, the UTOF, the Water Resource Recovery Facilities, transforms itself into a manager of valuable resources, a partner in local economic development, and a member of the watershed community, seeking to deliver maximum environmental benefit at the least cost to society. It does this by reclaiming and reusing wastewater, extracting and finding commercial uses for nutrients and other constituents, capturing waste heat and latent energy in biosolids and liquid streams, generating renewable energy, using its land and other assets, and using green infrastructure to manage stormwater, but also to improve the urban quality of life more broadly. And that's really what we're talking about today, not just a term, but a change in how we operate these facilities and how these facilities operate with the, the community and land around them. So I'll be speaking today about one piece of the water resource recovery pie, that's energy generation and recovery. And just as a disclaimer, I know you were saying that this session is focusing on food rescue efforts, but when you're generating renewable energy at a water resource recovery facility with biogas, you're feeding microbes. You're feeding thermophiles, mesophiles, and you talk to, operators, and they will tell you that they are farmers. They are farmers making sure that they are creating the absolutely ideal conditions in order to create this biological environment that allows them to treat this wastewater so they can protect human health and the environment. So, water resource recovery facilities have been, generating energy from sewage gas since the 1920s. This is not a new technology whatsoever, but the ways in which people are using it are kind of novel. Just to, again, focus on the importance of water resource recovery facilities generating renewable energy on site. I mean, these facilities are fundamental to the services that we provide as stewards of our environment. And when they're generating renewable energy on site, they're able to produce power at cost below retail rates, which means that they can keep rates low for their customers. They are able to displace purchased fuels for thermal needs, which means they're not using natural gas that they have, fracked to get at. And they're enhancing the power reliability of the plant. So if there is an earthquake and power lines are down, they can continue treating wastewater and protecting us. So when I first started at EPA, what you heard everybody talking about was the water energy nexus, and this was referring both to the incredible amount of water that is embedded in energy production, but then also the incredible amount of energy embedded in water production. Here in California, we spend about 20% of the state's electricity, 30% of the natural gas, 88 billion gallons of diesel, and moving water around the state, which is huge. And then when you look at how much water it's produced in produced for energy production, the single largest withdrawer of water is the thermoelectric industry. More than agriculture, they are withdrawing more water to produce power. There's a new nexus. We were hearing a little bit about that today in Dana Gunder's talk, and this is the relationship between food, water, and energy. And when I am talking about that you could produce food, energy from food, I'm not talking about dedicated energy crops, obviously, but biogas from wasted food. And why is this something that we care about in the Sustainable Water Program? Here's another pop quiz. But first, just sort of talking broadly, and some of you may be familiar with these statistics, but in 2013, more than 37 million tons of food waste was generated in the United States, and only 5% were diverted from landfills. According to USDA, Americans wasted over 1/3 of the vegetables and fruit bought in 2010. So we're focused as an agency on reducing food waste. We have a goal to reduce 50% by 2020. And what are our options? I mean, we don't want it to go to landfill. We have composting. You could go through a sink garbage disposal. You can co-digest at a water resource recovery facility. You could send it to a mixed MRF. Of those, which do you think has the lowest carbon footprint? D. Co-digestion at a water resource recovery facility. And this was done by a WRF report. Happy to share that with anyone if you're interested. And so it's the only carbon negative option according to this report, and that's because it's reducing the food waste from landfills. It's by capturing and combusting the methane that is produced at the water resource recovery facilities. It's minimizing hauling distances because water resource recovery facilities are often a lot closer than landfills and composting facilities. And then you're also sequestering carbon into soils through the land application of biosolids. Okay, so finally, resting my case, now onto the tool. It's very likely going to be available in fall 2016. It's an EPA Office of Research and Development funded project, and it's sort of two parts. There's the paper which describes the methodologies used to estimate the wasted food generation rates of various sectors, and then the map, which shows the facility-specific information for both what we're calling generators and processors, helping users identify opportunities to decrease the amount of food waste going to landfills. So what will it do, and who should use it? we are identifying, these generators, everyone who could be producing that wasted food, and then those processors, all the people who could take that food as an alternative to landfilling it. Potential users of the cool tool could, of course, be water resource recovery facilities, a state, city, or county, a prospective project developer looking into the feasibility of an AD site, and on and on. So the generators, we have about 1.3 million establishments representing 84 different NACE codes, which we've grouped into 7 different categories. And those are here. You'll notice, as with California, that the largest generators is the food services sector, followed by the food wholesalers and distributors, which consists of the grocery stores, etc. Other generators include food banks. And then we have, as a layer, the boundaries of communities with source-separated organics collection programs. So the information that we have for the each establishment that we show on the map is the name, the location, and contact details. And if we had the employee information, we could calculate food waste generation rates, and for even some of them, the edible fraction of wasted food within the tool. So here are some examples of generators. It's nice to look at this before lunch, I suppose. Not some particularly tasty things, but again, some things might not lend themselves to feeding people or animals. But here are some examples. And so who are the processors? We have food banks, about 79,000 animal farms, 1,400 AD facilities, anaerobic digestion facilities, so that involves both standalone AD facilities, on-farm digesters, and then water resource recovery facilities with anaerobic digesters, and about 2,000 composting facilities. We lacked the information on the exact location of many of these processors, so we have them grouped by zip code, and you'll see what that translates to in terms of creating the map in just a second here. So how did we estimate generation rates? We did not have so nearly as on-hand as an approach as California did. These are based on previous studies, including those from environmental agencies, state agencies in Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, and South Carolina. And we use sort of commonly available business statistics. So number of employees, annual revenue, number of seats, number of rooms, number of students. And then based on that information, we use these generation factors to provide an estimate for each facility. 5 minutes? That's fine. And so these will be available in the report. And here's the map. So you see the different shades of green. That's a chloropleth map representing the concentration of processors. So the darker the shade, the more processors there are. So the more animal farms, more food banks, the more anaerobic digestion facilities, et cetera. This is the layer list showing what you can select for the animal farms. We also have correctional facilities, educational institutions, food banks, healthcare facilities. And here's just a quick example in Minneapolis, Minnesota. These are, again, you see the polygon with orange stripes going through. That's the border of the community with SSO. And then, you see the dark shaded green representing the polygon with the total number of wasted food processors. You can select it. It tells you, well, this is the boundary for the city of Minneapolis. We know that there are about 4,500 residents. There's a 60% participation rate, about 60 tons per year collected. You select on one of the zip code polygons, and you see that there are 53 processors within the zip code. One is an anaerobic digestion facility. 51 are animal farms. It's just a close-up. Here we are in Massachusetts. You will be able to use the tool to identify an exact location and then search within a particular radius. We're looking at all the animal farms, correctional facilities, healthcare facilities, hotels, etc. Here is a close-up of what the pop-up would be for a correctional facility, the Massachusetts Department of Youth Services. You'll see that here we have a range because we use these different methodologies, so we're thinking it could be anywhere between 27 to 38 tons per year. For educational institutions, which, by the way, nationally is available for free. If you guys are lacking that data, we can, if it's, anyway, we can talk afterwards.
It has employment data?
And it has employment data, yeah. You could bring up the data not just as a single point, but as a table at the bottom of the screen. You'll be able to download a certain amount of records at a time. That's to be determined how many. And then you can have a summary, for what you're looking at. This shows the, the total number of generators in this particular area. So that's it. Have a few minutes for questions, and thanks very much. Yep.
I often hear that idea of diverting food residuals to wastewater,
Yeah,
whatever.
water resource recovery
Water
facility.
resource. And when I go out and talk to my facilities, they have capacity, but they're really careful and they want to guard it. So
Yeah.
the idea of accepting additional material when they could get like a big storm or something makes them really cautious about taking on the food residuals. So do you have any conversations about that? And can you repeat that?
Sure. The question is basically, are all water resource recovery facilities interested in co-digestion? And the answer is no. This is something that, you would have to have excess, capacity. You would have to have technical competence. You have to have willingness to give it a shot. Infrastructure to manage the material, expertise to manage the material, partnerships in place with the community to help get the project off the ground. I mean, it's a big lift. In terms of concern over rain events, that's not really an issue for many facilities. I mean, infiltration and inflow could be a problem, but most treatment plants in California are not combined stormwater sewer systems, so that's not.
Washington State.
Okay, well, never mind. But yeah, it's not for everybody, and but those who are doing it are huge fans. I mean, they have more than doubled their biogas production. They're offsetting costs. They're able to use that money to reinvest in capital improvements that protect water quality. Energy is usually a facility's number 2 or number 3 operating cost. So when they're not spending it on energy, they're spending it on more fundamental operations, which is critical and a huge benefit for doing this. Yep.
Would we be able to extract the data as a GIS data file or just Excel?
All EPA geodata has to be made publicly available. So yes, it will be available as GIS files. Yep. Sorry. Yep.
So just to clarify, and using the animal farms as an example, so if our county is using the tool to try to identify animal farms within the area that we can try and divert food waste to, the tool doesn't say, it's just a map, and it's just identifying potential places that may accept food waste. So if we, use the map and we find a couple places and we contact them and they say we're not interested in accepting that kind of stuff, is there any opportunity for feedback so that other places that are using the tool don't have to do that work again and get turned down and find out that that's not happening?
Yeah, so the question is, what would you do if you use the tool to get information about a potential processor, but then you contact the processor and they are not interested in working with you? We're going to have a contact us feature on the tool when it first goes live, so we can manually adjust records as needed. That, of course, will be a very arduous process, and what I'm hoping is in the future that this will become more of a wiki in that people are able to update information on their own. And it becomes less something that we don't manage the data, rather we manage the site that hosts the data. And I think that would be crucially important also just because these estimates are estimates, and nothing will be as useful as knowing, how much is actually being produced and what they're already doing with it. I mean, these are generation rates, not what's already happening rates. Yep.
Are you making any differentiation between the food that goes to the sewer plant through the pipes, or those that are delivered as a regular material ready for the digest? Did you make any differentiation there, or is any kind of food no matter how they get to the sewer?
These are just, these are just general. So the question is, would the tool differentiate between, how the food waste is getting to the processor? And the answer is no. These are just generation rates. And then we're identifying the processor as a way of saying, like, here is a place that could theoretically take this wasted food, or this food, if it is being wasted. So
we talked to the Southern California Public Sewer Plants Organization, and none of them wants the food that goes to the drain.
No. Well, that's a much bigger discussion that we can talk about later. But yeah, Philadelphia, which is a combined sewer stormwater, they are working with a company to try to get sink food waste disposers installed everywhere. But every operator I've ever spoken to does not want that to happen. That would be a huge problem in terms of potentially causing, sanitary sewer overflows, the other SSO.
Do you also did any differentiation between the plants that are treating water to be drinkable again and others that are not?
That information won't be contained in this tool, but that is available both through, I think it's through the Clean Watersheds Needs Survey. That information should be there, and if not there, it might be included in the biogasdata.org data set. Yep.
Take one more question, Charlie.
Sure.
You said, so food is the acronym for other organics. Does it specify what processors are taking food versus yard waste versus food cell paper?
So the question is, do we differentiate? In our processor data sets, do we say what they are taking or not taking, what their preferences are? And the answer is no. The only data set that does include that is the source separated organics data set, which does specify what the preference is. But again, because we haven't contacted all of these processors, we're just saying that they're there. And it's up to the users of the tool to see whether or not they could be partners in helping to reduce food waste. So.
Thank you, Charlotte. Sitting in the back, we got lots of seats up front, so including where I had my pencil. So look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 seats up right up here. So please come on up if you want to sit down. Next up, we're going to be talking with Karen Gisable, who manages the recycling outreach program for commercial, residential, and school programs for the city of Sunnyvale. She serves as co-chair of the ad hoc food rescue subcommittee of the Santa Clara County Technical Advisory Committee, and that committee has taken real leadership in the area around food rescue and is developing a countywide food rescue initiative. So, Karen, you'll talk for a minute while I get your slides up here.
Thank you. The tools are great. My mind is already spinning on ways we can use the CalRecycle tool. And the interesting thing in Sunnyvale is our water treatment plant is right next to our MRF, and they want our food. We're actually going to process our commercial food scraps into the stuff that we're collecting, not the usable stuff, but it's being made into a mash for food, for animal feed, which on Wednesday you can hear about that. But they want that stuff so bad. It's like, so we have options, which is really nice. So we're shifting gears now. We're going to talk about an effort underway in Santa Clara County for food rescue. And like some communities, we have a technical advisory committee, which is made up of folks from all the jurisdictions in our county. We meet on a monthly basis, and we work cooperatively on different waste reduction projects. So we had this one-time funds available in the budget, so we're all clamoring to decide on what to spend the money on. So I made a pitch for food rescue, and several of my colleagues and I decided to go forward with a food rescue project, partly because we know it's one of the higher priorities in the county. We want to get the food out of the landfill. So But before we could actually do anything with this project, we really needed to find out what the landscape was for food rescue in the county, what the gaps were. So we actually commissioned Food Shift to conduct some research on our behalf, so we can get an idea of what was going on. And of course, we do know there's compelling reasons to deal with food rescue, but we didn't know exactly what it was. You've heard the statistics this morning from Dana. I'm sure you've seen all of this. We were coming at it from the wasted food side of things. We want to get it out of landfill, reduce it. We know that 40% of all food produced is wasted, and that it's the number one item in the landfill, third largest greenhouse gas emitter. Surprisingly, that the amount of money is spent producing it, more than $750 million to dispose of it is mind-boggling to me. So, and then 34 million pounds of edible food went to the landfill in 2013. So we know it's an issue. The other side of it is that there's people out there who can use the food and eat the food, and 1 in 4 adults and 1 in 3 children are at risk of hunger. And in Santa Clara County alone, 125 million additional meals are needed to feed the hungry. So we knew there was an issue, and we really wanted to start addressing it. So we hired Food Shift to do some surveys and interviews, and to kind of find out what the landscape was for what barriers were out there for food rescue. They sent both electronic and mailed surveys out to 55 food producers, which is made up of restaurants, grocery stores, schools, and then 25 food rescue organizations or assistance organizations in Santa Clara County. We have Peninsula Food Runners. There's lots of soup kitchens and food banks. And then they also did one-on-one interviews to some of the same folks, and also to professionals in the field to find out opinions and ideas and, boots on the ground, what was actually happening and what were the issues. So some of the overarching findings of the report were that a lot of the food that the food banks were getting is bread and baked goods. They like some of it, but they don't want as much as they're getting. They're not getting as much protein and fresh produce as they'd like. I guess a lot of food, bakeries, grocery stores, they bake it, and then, like with the labeling issues, the stuff gets dumped, pretty quickly. So there's a lot of bread out there. Businesses are donating, but they're donating, they're small donations, 100 pounds of food donated by a business or smaller. One big, huge issue is that the county is lacking capacity in infrastructure, storage, refrigeration, transportation, and that those issues are actually a greater challenge than actually finding the donations and getting it to the shelters. And then found, and this is typical when we talk to businesses, that a lot of them aren't donating at all, and part of the reason is, the biggest concern is their fear of liability. Almost every business we talk to is, when we go out to do our 1826 work, is we always bring up the issue of, we'd like you to consider donating your food if you can, and are willing to, and they're, one of the first things they say is, oh no, we don't want to do that, it's a liability, what if someone gets sick, what if someone dies, what if, our name is splashed all over the news, and they're not aware of the Good Samaritan Act, so we are educating folks, and we have to continue doing that and letting them know that there's never been any lawsuit from anyone donating food out there. So again, it's just letting people know what the issues are. And then some of the other issues are they don't necessarily have enough to donate, they don't know how to do it, they don't have the staff or the timing or the storage to hold on to the food to get it to the food rescue organizations. And then some of the other barriers, like I said, the lack of infrastructure, transportation, storage, unreliable collections. That could be, a lot of the food rescue organizations count on volunteers, and if they can't get the volunteers lined up, then the food can't get collected. Sometimes the donations are unpredictable. Maybe they'll get a shipment of tomatoes from a field one day, but then they won't have it for another 2 weeks. So the shelters don't always know. If they're cooking food, they don't know what they're going to get. The unhealthy donations was about the getting too many carbohydrate type foods as opposed to fresh produce and protein. No innovation. I'm not sure exactly what that pertained to, but probably things like using like Uber to deliver food during off hours, or just trying to think outside the box in the system that's existed for so long, and everyone's so busy all the time they don't really have time to think outside the box. So I think that's one of the things we're hoping this project will crack into a little bit. Inefficient distribution, that's partly the transportation issue. A truck could be, or food rescue folks could be delivering food and driving back with an empty truck or vehicle. Couldn't they pick up food somewhere else and take it to another place? So just working with the system of distribution and finding ways to make it more efficient. Funding, lack of funding always seems to be an issue. The liability myth I already talked about. And then the bottom one, the franchise agreements, I don't know if that was an issue necessarily with the food rescue organizations, but it is something just to think about. A lot of our franchises have language in it that says food waste is putrescible, and so it goes into the franchise. And if you're I'm guessing most franchises wouldn't bother with putting their foot down if you're taking food and giving it to people who really need it. So I don't think that's probably a big, huge issue, but it's definitely something to think about. So we went ahead and so Food Shift came out with this nice report for us and had quite a few recommendations in it. We took the first two, which was to hire a coordinator, and so we did that about 4 months ago. And they are starting to establish a regional working group. We actually had a forum, which I'll talk about in a minute, but the regional working group is made up of stakeholders in the community and folks from all the different cities, the solid waste professionals. And then they're tasked with developing a community action plan, which will, address some of the issues that came up in the report. And then on source reduction, they are not going to be addressing source reduction. I know that Dane talked about that this morning. It's, not that many people are doing it, but we sort of feel like that task falls to the jurisdictions, and we really want the coordinator to focus on getting a community action plan set up and getting the food where it needs to go. Source reduction obviously it's important and it needs to happen, but we're not tasking them to do that part of it. We did hold a forum in March, and we had over 100 folks there. It was great. Lots of stakeholders in the community. People were very excited to talk about the issue. We also had a few app developers there who have apps that exist. There are tons of apps, it turns out. There's I saw a list recently, I think there's 20 or 30 apps, some of them local, some of them nationwide. So there's lots of technology out there. It's just really trying to find a way to put it to good use. And if there's a way to make it simpler for people to donate the food and get it to where it wants to go, to where it needs to go, that's part of trying to find some of those innovations, I think. And again, we had working groups within the forum to start, talking about some of the issues. So it was very exciting to get this going, and it sort of led to the group that has now started meeting to develop the action plan, the strategy for that. The goals for the coordinator will be to prioritize the recommendations from the report and to build stakeholder relationships, to develop the regional working group. And it's basically a county working group, but we are finding that other counties, Alameda County, I think San Mateo County might be starting to work on it too. So there are lots of, it hopefully will become more of a regional thing, but right now we're just working on it in Santa Clara County. They have a 3-year contract with us, so part of what they will probably start working on soon is to figure out a way to make to have sustainable funding to continue the work that they're working on, and then they do report to us on a quarterly basis on what their efforts have been. So we did establish the Food Rescue Council. We're calling it FORK. They had our first meeting was held in June, and the beginnings of the community action plan are just starting. Honestly, it's a huge project to get your arms around, so it's got its fits and starts, but we're hoping that with these 3 working groups, they're kind of broken out into different topic areas, and so those folks are going out into the community and asking more questions, trying to dig down deeper into what some of the findings were in the report and kind of match up, to make sure those really are the areas to be working on. And our next meeting's August 24th, so we're sort of right in the beginning of this project, and it's pretty exciting. I was just going to say the Food Shift report, if you want to get your hands on it, you can get it at foodshift.net/report. And that's probably the easiest way to find it if you're interested. So that's that.
Great. Can I take a couple of questions?
Yeah, any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking of like the financial side of things. Is there like some sort of tax benefit for the people donating the food?
There is. I don't know that much about it, but I believe that. I don't know if anyone knows. Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm Chris Beeling from Boston, EPA in Boston, and we have done a very similar project in Massachusetts. And yes, there is tax benefits. Depends on the state. There's federal tax benefits that are actually very good, but I don't know the state of California regs, to be perfectly honest with you. But one project I was going to say is we did a very similar thing, and we came up with best management practices, and we have a tax incentive piece. We have a liability piece, very much like you mentioned, and also the date labeling piece. And we work with a group called the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic, which is the other co-author of the dating game that was mentioned today. So it's a great, and I think it's very replicable. It's national comprehensive food guidelines. We work with the Food Safety Committee. So I'm just going to put that out there, that there's some good work that has been done that I would totally steal.
Yeah. We're trying to steal if we can, for sure.
So,
yeah, thank you. It's a big project. Any other questions?
Great.
Yeah.
There's both a tax credit and incentive state for California state, so you can actually.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I think to let businesses know that, they might be more inclined to donate. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks.
Now we're going to hear from the other part of the state. We're going to hear from Jessica Toth, who's the executive director of the Solana Center for Environmental Innovation, where she's been since 2012. And she comes from a really diverse background, in the nonprofit sector, helping us in the waste prevention and recycling arena. But she has been working for Rob Machado Foundation, Hewlett-Packard, the World Bank, San Diego Gas and Electric, the San Diego Zoo. So I think that you come from a lot of different perspectives that you can bring to these solutions. And she's going to be talking about the Solana Center's Food Cycle SD and Integrated System Solution for San Diego County. So come on up, Jessica.
Well, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to hear from all these speakers here. I'm going to talk about Food Cycle. I'll talk about one major overall program and 3 specific projects that we have going. But first, just to tell you, this is not a stage photo. This is a school in downtown San Diego. These kids were very excited to show us how they harvested these apples from the apple tree in their school garden, and then when they finished eating them, they threw the cores in the compost bin. And somehow I think we've gotten away from this idea of the full cycle of food, when these kids really got it. They ate the food there. They understood that the compost was going to or the food that went into compost would become nutrient-rich for the soil. Very briefly, the Solana Center for Environmental Innovation has been around for over 30 years. It's a nonprofit based in the San Diego area. We were the first curbside recyclers in Southern California, and we serve all of San Diego County.
Today we do a lot of composting education, which we've been doing for 15 to 20 years, primarily residential composting education in the past at schools and also with residents. We have a 5-week program and then we have workshops as well. But what we've seen lately is that there's a demand for mid-scale composting. So we recently produced some curriculum for the county for mid-scale composting operations. We were getting requests from entrepreneurs, from farms, from community gardens, how they could manage their a larger scale composting operation, larger than what you might have for residential. So you've got issues of what is the feedstock is different, the material that's going into the compost is different, as well as issues of stormwater runoff. So this is something that we've been involved in as well. So over the last couple years, what we've seen, and the previous speakers have addressed this as well, there's really an issue, almost a need for organics marketplace to meet supply and demand. And so we've been approached over time by grocery stores, fast food restaurants, and the various types of entities listed there, as well as on the other side with the food rescue organizations, community gardens. We have a petting zoo near us that's telling us that they are bringing in processed animal food from a distance. Why can't they bring food, use food waste that's generated within the community? This is going to tie very nicely also when we use the waste characterization database that Cal Recycle introduced here. But ultimately, we want a way to connect the supply and demand to keep the valuable material out of the landfill. And that's been a consistent theme with us. So, and similar to what Charlotte was talking about with the wasted food mapping tool, we've been looking at how, so the red dots are, this is in the city of Encinitas, where we're physically located. The red dots are food-generating businesses, and the green dots are yard trimming, landscape waste generators. So we needed a way to understand where all these people are physically distributed and to understand that we have agricultural sites and community gardens nearby. San Diego region is relatively unique in some ways, which is that we have the largest number of farms, or the largest number of organic farms, but the largest number of farms of any county. And what that results in is we have, in close proximity, commercial sites, residential sites, and areas where you could use the agricultural sites. So what we're looking to do is to build a self-sufficient closed-loop food system in our region. So this is very similar to the food pyramid, the difference being that it sort of conveys the circular nature and the ecosystem concept. So we want to connect surplus food with need, so feeding people, feeding animals, of course. I won't get into the details here, biofuels, and ultimately compost. There is another unique characteristic in our area, and it sounds like I'm hearing more and more regions. We have no large commercial solution yet. We don't have composting. We don't have anaerobic digestion. So there's an opportunity right now, until those facilities are put in place, to look for the upstream, the diversion, the reduction, the prevention opportunities to become in compliance with AB 1826. I see that as a real call to action for us, because once there is a large facility, the food waste and the organic material is just going to go away, and it's no longer a problem. Right now, we're in a situation, we're working with the city of Del Mar. The nearest place that they can take their food waste is going to be trucked up to Orange County, which is 2 hours by truck. So, we've got issues of the greenhouse gas generated from that, issues of there's agricultural sites right nearby that could use the organic material, and the wear and tear on the road. So I feel that we've got a window of time until these large facilities come into place to really change behaviors and attitudes. So the food cycle is an integrated system solution combining outreach, technology, and training to connect surplus food with need, address hunger in San Diego County, and enable a future with landfills that will be free of edibles and compostables. And I know we've got a very knowledgeable audience here, so you all know that 40% of what's in our landfill is edible or compostable, and it's the largest component of what's in there. The technology piece, there's lots of technology. You from Boston, I'm sure, know of the Spoiler Alert. They're a great organization. We've been working with them. There's lots of technology solutions. Training, we've been going into organizations, food-generating businesses, and similar to what Dana spoke of this morning, I totally agree that the top two areas are awareness and information. When we go into a business and we start talking about what we like to do is we assess what the volume is and how the operations are functioning. Determine prevention and diversion opportunities. At that stage, often the business is going, oh my goodness, I had no idea we were throwing out that much food. I'll go to grocery stores and they are putting their food waste in a compactor with the rest of their trash. So they don't really have a concept because it's not all going in one dumpster, it's not all being put aside. So even the actions of steps 1 through 2 is an eye-opener. There's that awareness and information that Dana was speaking about this morning. Introducing technology, if there's some enabling technology. Partnerships is key with the food rescue groups and with others in the community, and monitor and reporting is I'm big on that. So I'm going to talk about our Less to Landfill program that we have just briefly. Essentially, it's assessing businesses' food waste in 3 steps. We audit, we design new processes, and then we support them with training and signage. We have some progressive cities in our jurisdictions in our area who are actually supporting us because AB 1826 is in part their responsibility. So they're helping us get in the door because businesses are really not embracing at this point that they need to do something, especially in our community where we don't have some place to take it. So some jurisdictions are giving us, are sponsoring us to go work in businesses to start this process for them, particularly with the AB 1826 regulations now. We have a project going in the city of Oceanside. We have generous support from the city of Oceanside and the Oceanside Charitable Foundation. We worked with a special needs home, so this is part of the food cycle, sort of keeping it in the vicinity instead of sending the food out or sending it to the landfill. This is a residential home with 6 adult men, and where they're composting their own food waste. So again, we assessed what quantity of food waste they had. They were throwing away about 40 pounds a week of pre- and post-consumer food waste, which is now all being composted on site. So their landfill waste was about, is now 61% of the amount that it was before, so we made a significant reduction. In effect, they went from 6% of all of the waste they were generating at the house to 43%. I'll show you that on the next slide. We're using a bokashi technique. Has anybody heard of bokashi? So the bokashi technique allows us to do 2 things. It's a fermentation process. It's an anaerobic process. So you lock down the food with an inoculated, we're using inoculated bran. It allows us 2 things, as I said. We're handling the post-consumer food waste. So meat and bones and sauces, dairy products are all going in there, including sodas, all kinds of things, so that we don't lose all that material. The other thing is that it allows us to process the food waste on our own schedule. The residents don't have to be going out and managing the compost on a regular basis. They lock it into this bin. It sits there for 2 weeks fermenting, and then when we have our volunteers work with them, we're able to open up those bins and work it into the compost. So turns out it's an ancient technique used in Japan, but we've newly started using it. This is the pie chart of their diversion. As I mentioned, I'm big on monitoring and reporting. So what we see is that previously, 5% of a total of 6% is what they were diverting through recyclables and yard trimmings, and now we've gone to 43% of all the waste that they're generating at this house is being diverted. And they have lovely gardens there, and the idea is that they will use the compost to work it into. And it's a wonderful situation working with the special needs folks. The exercises, of using the aerator and moving the compost is completely in keeping with the type of work that is enjoyable for them. This is another project that we worked on. It was. I've skipped one on my notes here. Here we took from a fast food restaurant to a farm, 3/4 of a mile away in the city of Encinitas. So the farm previously, it's 67 acres, and they were buying finished compost from about 25 miles away, bringing it in. We took the pre-consumer food waste, 3 cubic yards a week, from a fast food restaurant, and had it trucked over to the agricultural site, and they composted it with 2 part-time farmers. What they found is that the compost that they were creating through this process was 5 times more nutrient-rich. It saved them the money and also the trucking in of the finished compost. And the fast food establishment was saving $250 a month on their hauling bill. So this was a 6-month project. Over that time, we diverted 53 cubic yards of food scrap and calculate that that was approximately equivalent to avoiding 23 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. This was a pilot project to prove out the concept, but essentially keeping the food waste in the community. The only alternative for this fast food restaurant would have been to truck it out of town or to put it in the landfill. Neither are ideal solutions. I have one more project to talk to you about, and this is a beach event that attracts 15,000 attendees every year right on the beach. Last year, we diverted 3,000 pounds, or excuse me, the event generated 3,000 pounds of waste. 785 pounds of that was pre- and post-consumer food waste. So again, we used the bokashi method of composting. We took all of that and incorporated it into our gardens at the Solana Center, which is 3 miles away. So keeping it all within the community again. 4 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent was avoided from both the recycling and composting that we captured, and we work with 100 volunteers to make that happen. And I think I have a pie chart next. I don't have a pie chart next. So the total diversion for last year's Switchfoot Bro-Am concert was 83%. Previously, I'll just go back one. Yeah, it's stopped. Oh, there we go. In previous years, we've done this event for now 4 consecutive years. In previous years, we were only able to get about 56% diversion by just capturing the recyclables. And this year, by adding the food element, we got up to 83% diversion of the entire for the entire event. Okay, thank you. Benefits to the business of this kind of food cycle process, of course, the reduced expenses up front and operating costs if they're able to prevent the disposal and the purchasing of excess food. The donation tax credits, which we talked a little bit about. The tax incentive, to answer your question earlier, is the cost basis plus a half of the potential profit. So it's not insignificant for the donating business. Promotional value, some of the businesses we work with want to promote what they're doing. Others, like that fast food restaurant, did not want it known that it was them who was doing it. And, of course, compliance with the regulations. I'll try. Oops, yeah, it's working now. Going to make you dizzy. Okay. And there are some barriers, of course. There are always barriers. Lack of infrastructure. So, for example, when we worked on the pilot program, one of the reasons that it's not continuing is that there's not a route. We have a franchise agreement with the haulers who are the ones exclusively able to carry material. They worked with us on that pilot project, but they are not set up to be delivering from point A to point B. Their design is that they work with the route density, pick up in a whole series of places, and take it to a transfer station. California composting restrictions on the volume for the mid-scale, and that's becoming, those restrictions are being eased, so that's good news. The low landfill tipping fees. So in general, its least expensive option is to just send it to the landfill. Franchise agreements I mentioned, and local land use zoning regulations can be a problem. And we've got so many different jurisdictions. Those land use policies tend to be different in every different location. Lack of awareness and the information piece, as Dana was talking about, information and awareness is very important. And business adoption obstacles. You know, once you go in and you start identifying things, they're ready to go. But to open the door and start evaluating their operations is a tough sell. Okay. I did a sort of back-of-the-envelope calculation, so don't take this too much to heart, but the refed solutions, going through the 27 solutions that they have, a food cycle type of program addresses 15 of those solutions. And so if that were to be embraced nationwide, just back-of-the-envelope, we're looking at 2.5 million tons per year across the United States of diversion potential, economic value of $6.4 billion a year, and 871 million meals a year recovered. So this type of keeping it in the community, closing the loop process could really have some significant impact if it were adopted. And I think that's all that I have. Yes, thank you. Any questions? And I have some information up front if you guys want to know more. Yeah.
One of the concerns we have is with permits, and you touched on that slightly about food to farm, fast food to farm.
Yeah.
Generally, the movement of something that's called solid waste requires a permit.
Yeah.
So did you encounter that in other programs, or does California have a pretty good, easy permit system?
So we're a nonprofit, and we've taken a little bit of license. The 6-month project that we did was a pilot project. When we completed the project, we notified the LEA, the local enforcement agent, who said, please stop doing this. But they also said, can we come out and see what you're doing? And they came out and they toured it, and they were very excited to see what we were doing. And since then, they have started taking our classes on Bokashi to learn more about it. So we are not a government agency. We are not afraid to get a slap on the wrist. But at the same time, we recognize and very aware of what the restrictions are. The Bokashi project that we did with the concert, the surf contest, and the concert, we notified them in advance and told them, because we would be moving the food waste from that beach location 3 miles to our offices, and they gave us approval. They authorized it. So it's definitely something to be aware of. Any other questions? Yes.
So how is it going with the outreach to other businesses in the region? Are they being open to it? They understand? Are they we're willing to do something.
So the question is, how open are businesses to, I guess, going in and working with them? I would not sugarcoat it and say that they are opening their doors. It really is depending very much on the jurisdiction that we're working with and how much outreach they've done to make the businesses aware. So when we send out material and we say, did you know of AB 1826, for the most part, they're not aware that they're responsible to very soon, if not now, to keep their food waste out of the landfill. It's not easy. Yes?
So when your pilot program's over, what do you foresee as the next step, since there isn't a way to see?
Well, we have many projects in the works. So what we're trying to do is sort of prove out as many of these concepts as possible. We did just run this mid-scale composting course, and so there was a lot of interest in that. We'd like to continue to develop that for other jurisdictions, and we have other programs in place. So what we're trying to do is publicize these things. Unfortunately, we don't get funding for a lot of this. So in the case where we had the 6-month pilot project, we were paid a small fee by the fast food restaurant to handle their waste, and we were paid a small fee by the agricultural site, but it didn't really cover expenses. So we're trying to get funding to do these kinds of programs. Innovation is in our name, and we're trying to take that seriously. But to answer your question, yeah, it's really sort of these pockets where we can prove out concepts and let others take on the cause if we can. Any other questions?
Great, well, let's have a round of applause for all of
Next up, we have networking and topic lunches. So lunch is on your own, and then come on back for our